He wasn't supposed to survive. Max, the German shepherd, sat alone at the train station, his amber eyes fixed on the tracks as if he were waiting for something, someone. The air was cold and damp, carrying the faint scent of the nearby ocean. The hustle of city life moved on around him, yet Max remained still, his body slightly trembling with anticipation. He had been here for days, every morning at the same spot, looking at the horizon as though expecting his owner to return. Sergeant Daniel Carter had promised him that he would be back, but that was months ago. Max didn't understand what had happened. All he knew was that he was waiting, hoping that his Marine would return. The journey had been long, not just for Daniel, but for both of them. They had been inseparable, a team forged through the heat of battle. Together, they had faced the harshest of circumstances, and now Max was left to face the hardest one yet, the separation. Daniel had gone to war and never came back, not in the way Max had hoped. His owner was left injured, recovering in a distant hospital, and Max was left behind, waiting in the place where they had shared their last moments. It was hard to say when exactly it began. The waiting, the sense of being abandoned, and the quiet despair that followed. Each day passed slowly, the minutes stretching into hours, and Max would only get up to stretch his legs, sniff the air, then return to his post. The people around him would glance at the lonely dog and wonder why he stayed, but only Max knew the answer: loyalty. His heart was tethered to Daniel's, and no matter how much time had passed, he would remain at the train station, the place where Daniel had promised to return. As the sun began to dip below the horizon one evening, casting long shadows across the tracks, a figure appeared in the distance. Max's ears perked up, his eyes narrowed, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. His body tensed with anticipation. Was it him? Could it be Daniel? He had heard it before, in the faintest of moments, a whisper of hope that this time, it would be real. Max's tail began to wag. His eyes locked on the figure moving steadily towards him. The figure grew clearer, the silhouette more defined. Max's heart raced. It was him. It was Daniel. For a moment, Max could hardly believe it. The pain of waiting, the loneliness, it all melted away as he saw the man who had been his constant companion all those years. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold back, but the moment they were within reach, Max ran. He ran faster than he had ever run before, the wind rushing past his face, the ground slipping beneath his paws. And as he neared Daniel, he leaped, crashing into him with a force that nearly knocked him off his feet. Daniel staggered, his arms going around Max in a reflexive gesture, as the two reunited in the most perfect moment of silence. Max licked Daniel's face as if saying, "I knew you would come back." And for Daniel, the weight of the world seemed to lift as he hugged his loyal companion, realizing that the bond between them was unbreakable. The years of separation, the loneliness, they didn't matter anymore. They were together again. The moment Daniel and Max reunited felt like a dream, one that neither of them was ready to wake up from. The world seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them, locked in an embrace that was more than just a reunion. It was a promise fulfilled, a bond that death, time, and distance couldn't sever. As Max's tail wagged furiously, Daniel felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling that had eluded him for so long. The weight of war, the scars that still haunted his every step, faded away in the presence of his loyal companion. They stood there for what seemed like an eternity, the station bustling around them, but neither of them cared. In that moment, all that mattered was the fact that Max was finally home, and Daniel was no longer alone. They had both endured the worst of times, but they had made it through, together. Daniel knelt down, placing his hands gently on Max's shoulders. He could feel the dog's heartbeat beneath his palms, steady and strong. "You waited for me, buddy," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. Max's ears perked up, his eyes shining as he licked Daniel's face, a silent reply that said everything. He had never stopped waiting, not once, even when the world had turned its back on them. It was as if time had no power over their bond. Daniel stood up, wiping away a tear, and motioned for Max to follow. They began walking towards the exit of the station, side by side, just like they had walked through life before. Max kept close, his gaze never leaving Daniel's side. The city around them continued its rhythm, but for Daniel, it was as if he was seeing it all for the first time. He wasn't just walking through the streets of his hometown anymore. He was walking with Max, his best friend, the one who had never given up on him. As they reached the street, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't facing it alone. Max was there, by his side, as he always had been. The memories of their time apart, the long months of uncertainty and fear, didn't seem to matter anymore. The pain of being separated, of wondering if he would ever see his dog again, was all gone, replaced by the simple joy of being reunited. They continued walking, the weight of the past slowly lifting off Daniel's shoulders. The sounds of the city faded into the background as he looked down at Max, who was walking confidently beside him. It was as if Max knew the journey ahead was going to be a new one, a better one. The bond between them had always been unbreakable, and now it felt even stronger. As they strolled through the quiet streets, Daniel found himself smiling for the first time in months. He didn't need words to express how he felt. Max's presence was enough. The two of them had survived the hardest battles, and now they were ready to face whatever came next, together. As Daniel and Max walked through the quiet streets, the city seemed to fade away, as if the noise and chaos of the world had been put on hold. The night air was crisp, and the scent of autumn leaves filled the atmosphere. Daniel felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in a long time. He looked down at Max, whose tail wagged gently, the rhythm of it matching the steady pace of their steps. The bond between them had always been there, but now it felt even stronger. It was as if time and distance had only deepened their connection, not weakened it. They passed familiar landmarks. The park where Daniel had once jogged with Max, the diner where they used to stop for a quick bite after long days of training. Everything felt different now, as though he was seeing it all with new eyes. The simple act of walking down the street with Max was a reminder of the life he had once lived, the life he was now ready to return to. The world had moved on, but Daniel and Max were still here, together, and that was all that mattered. They walked for what felt like hours, the city lights casting long shadows across their path. At one point, Max stopped to sniff a lamppost, his nose twitching as he examined the scent. Daniel smiled, watching his dog with affection. "You always know when something's important, don't you, buddy?" he said softly. Max gave a low bark, as if agreeing with him. They continued on, the night growing quieter as they made their way to the small house Daniel had once called home. As they reached the front door, Daniel paused, his hand on the knob. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but as the door creaked open, the familiar smell of home hit him. It was warm and comforting, a stark contrast to the cold night air outside. He stepped inside, and Max followed closely behind, his paws silent on the hardwood floor. The house felt empty, yet full at the same time. It had been so long since Daniel had truly been home. He hadn't realized how much he had missed the simple things, the sound of the floorboards creaking beneath his feet, the soft glow of the lamp in the corner, and most of all, the presence of Max by his side. He set down his bag and took a deep breath, looking around the room as memories flooded back. There was the old couch where he used to relax after a long day, the coffee table with the faded magazine that Max had knocked over countless times, and the window where he would sit and look out at the stars, wondering what the future held. But tonight, he didn't feel that uncertainty. Tonight, with Max at his side, he felt ready. Ready to rebuild, ready to heal, and ready to live again. He turned to Max, who had already made himself comfortable on the rug, his eyes half closed in contentment. "We made it, buddy," Daniel whispered, sinking down beside him. Max let out a soft sigh, resting his head on his paws. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt at peace. He wasn't sure what the future held, but with Max by his side, he knew he could face anything. The days following Daniel's return to his small house felt like a slow but steady healing process. The weight of war, the lingering effects of the long separation from Max, and the quiet struggles of reintegrating into civilian life began to fade, little by little. Daniel found comfort in the simple routines, waking up to the soft sound of Max's paws on the floor, the warm cup of coffee in the morning, and the quiet walks they took in the park near their home. Each moment, each step, felt like a small victory. Max, ever loyal, was right by his side, reminding him that he was never truly alone. The bond between them grew stronger, forged not only by shared experiences, but by the shared peace they now found in each other's company. It had been a long time since Daniel had felt this sense of normalcy, a sense of home. There was something reassuring about knowing that no matter what, Max would always be there. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft orange, Daniel found himself sitting on the porch, gazing out at the horizon. Max lay beside him, his head resting on his paws, watching the world with calm, steady eyes. It had been a long journey, but here they were, together, at last. Daniel thought back to the days before the war, before everything had changed. Back then, life had seemed so much simpler. He remembered the quiet moments with Max, playing fetch in the backyard, taking long walks without a care in the world. He thought about how everything had shifted so abruptly. But now, with Max beside him, he felt a sense of renewal, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance to rebuild. The stillness of the evening was broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath, letting the peacefulness wash over him. The sounds of the world seemed distant, as if everything had slowed down just for this moment. It was as if the universe had granted them this small piece of peace, a moment to reflect, to rest, and to simply be. Max lifted his head slightly, his ears twitching as he heard a distant sound. Daniel smiled, rubbing Max's ear. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, half amused. Max turned his head, his eyes meeting Daniel's with that same quiet understanding. "You're always so alert, aren't you?" Daniel chuckled softly, knowing that Max's instincts had never faltered. Despite everything, despite the pain and the loss, they had both survived. And now, they had each other. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Daniel reached over and patted Max gently on the head. He didn't need to say anything. Max had always understood him, and in return, Daniel understood the dog in ways that words could never capture. Together, they sat in the quiet of the evening, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. It wasn't the life Daniel had imagined, but it was enough. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he had everything he needed. Max was home, and so was he. As the weeks passed, Daniel settled into a new routine with Max by his side. Every morning, the sun would rise over the quiet neighborhood, casting golden light through the windows. Daniel would get up, feeling the weight of the day ahead, but it didn't feel so heavy anymore. Max would greet him with a wagging tail and a gentle nudge, as if to remind him that there was still joy in the world, even after everything they had been through. Their walks became the highlight of Daniel's day. It wasn't just about the exercise, it was about the peace they found together in the quiet moments. The world could be loud, chaotic, and unpredictable, but when Daniel was with Max, it was as if nothing else mattered. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, Daniel noticed a change in himself. The shadows of his past, the memories of war, still lingered, but they no longer had the same grip on him. He could breathe a little easier now. His steps were more confident, his mind a little clearer. And with Max walking by his side, he felt stronger. They stopped by the small pond, where the water reflected the clear blue sky. Max immediately bounded over to the edge, his paws skimming the surface as he chased after a bird that flew too close. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "You never change, do you?" he said softly, watching Max dart around with the same enthusiasm he'd had since he was a pup. Max paused, looking back at him with a playful glint in his eyes, as if to say, "I'm still here, and I'm still happy." Daniel knelt down and rubbed Max's head, feeling the warmth of the dog's fur beneath his fingers. It was moments like this that made him realize how much he had missed, how much he had taken for granted before. Max had been there through it all, through the hardships, the long deployments, the quiet nights filled with memories of battles fought and friends lost. And now, Max was here, with him, in a way that felt more like home than anything ever had before. As they sat on the park bench, Daniel leaned back, his eyes following a group of children playing nearby. The world seemed so different now, so full of possibility. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could face it. Max rested his head on Daniel's lap, his eyes closing in contentment. They sat in silence for a while, just enjoying the quiet, enjoying each other's company. Daniel had come to understand that sometimes, healing didn't come in grand gestures. It came in small moments, in the day-to-day things that made life worth living. As the sun began to set, casting a soft pink hue over the sky. Daniel stood up, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He looked down at Max, who was already on his feet, ready for whatever came next. Together, they walked back home, the sound of Max's paws echoing softly in the evening air. Daniel didn't know what the future held, but with Max by his side, he knew they could face it, one step at a time. As the months passed, life began to settle into a comfortable rhythm for Daniel and Max. Their bond, once tested by time and distance, had only grown stronger. Daniel found himself waking up each day with a sense of purpose, not from the expectations of the world, but from the quiet companionship that Max provided. The mornings had a soft, steady rhythm. Daniel would rise early, make his coffee, and then they would take their walk. Max, as usual, was right by his side, always a few steps ahead, but never too far. It was a simple routine, but it brought Daniel peace. One morning, as the sun stretched its golden rays across the horizon, Daniel found himself sitting on the porch, his coffee cup in hand, watching Max run in the yard. Max's joy was infectious, his carefree movements a reminder to Daniel of the joy that still existed in the world. It was a reminder that even after all the hardship, there was still beauty to be found in the simplest of things. As he watched Max, Daniel realized just how far he had come. The memories of his time in the military, the long stretches of loneliness and uncertainty, no longer haunted him in the same way. They still lingered, of course, but they had lost their grip on him. With Max at his side, he had found a new way to live, a way that embraced the quiet, the peaceful moments, the little victories that often went unnoticed. Max was always there, always by his side, reminding him that life was about more than just surviving. It was about living, truly living. The mornings spent together, the walks through the park, the quiet nights at home, these were the things that mattered now. And it wasn't just about finding peace in the present. It was about looking forward to the future, knowing that no matter what it held, he would face it with Max by his side. One evening, as they took their usual walk through the neighborhood, Daniel noticed a couple of kids playing in the yard of a nearby house. They were running around, laughing, full of energy and excitement. Max paused for a moment, his head tilting curiously at the scene. Daniel smiled, feeling a flicker of nostalgia. He remembered the days when everything had felt uncertain, when he had questioned what the future held. But now, as he watched the children play and saw Max looking back at him with that familiar, trusting gaze, he knew that he was exactly where he needed to be. Life had a way of surprising him, of offering moments of joy when he least expected them. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, he was at peace with himself. He was no longer the man who had come back from war, broken and uncertain. He was someone new, someone who had found healing in the quiet companionship of a dog who had never given up on him. Together, they had built something stronger than the past, something worth looking forward to. As they walked home under the starry sky, Daniel felt a sense of calm wash over him. Max trotted beside him, his tail wagging gently, his eyes full of understanding. In that moment, Daniel knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. As the seasons changed, so did the world around Daniel and Max. The once quiet neighborhood began to show signs of life, with children returning to school and families spending more time outdoors. Daniel found himself slowly reconnecting with the world he had left behind. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of his past still hung heavy on him. But with Max at his side, everything felt a little more manageable. One afternoon, as they walked along their usual route, Daniel noticed a small group of neighbors gathered by the park, their voices filled with laughter and conversation. It was the kind of scene he had avoided before, the kind that felt too normal, too ordinary. But today, something felt different. Today, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. As they approached, one of the neighbors, a woman named Sarah, waved them over. "Hey Daniel, Max, come join us for a little get-together. We're just grilling and hanging out." For a moment, Daniel hesitated. Social interactions had always been difficult for him, especially since his return. The small talk, the pretending everything was fine, it felt like too much to bear. But Max, ever the social creature, trotted forward, tail wagging, his eyes shining with excitement. Daniel smiled softly and gave a small wave back. "Sure," he said, his voice steady. "Why not?" As they walked over, Max greeted the other dogs with enthusiasm, his tail wagging so fiercely it almost looked like he was dancing. Daniel couldn't help but laugh, watching his dog fit in so effortlessly. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight in his chest lighten just a little. It wasn't a huge breakthrough, but it was something. He had spent so much time shutting himself off from the world, burying himself in the quiet routine he had built with Max, that he had forgotten what it felt like to be a part of something. As the evening wore on, Daniel found himself enjoying the simple pleasure of conversation. The small talk didn't feel as forced as it once had, and he actually found himself laughing at the jokes shared around the grill. Max, of course, was the center of attention, as always, his goofy antics bringing smiles to everyone's faces. It was a side of life that Daniel had missed, a side he had once taken for granted. He realized, sitting there among his neighbors, that he wasn't as alone as he had thought. Life had a way of surprising him, of offering moments of connection when he least expected them. And as the sun set and the stars began to emerge in the sky, Daniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. The world was still uncertain, and he knew there would be challenges ahead, but for now, he was exactly where he needed to be. With Max by his side, and the warmth of new friendships beginning to bloom, he could face whatever came next. The night ended with goodbyes and promises to do it again soon. Daniel walked home with Max, feeling a quiet contentment that he hadn't felt in years. As they approached the house, Max glanced up at him, his amber eyes filled with the same understanding that had always been there. Daniel patted his head and smiled. "We're doing okay, aren't we, buddy?" Max let out a soft bark, as if to say, "We're more than okay." And in that moment, Daniel realized he was right. They had both made it through the hardest parts of their journey, and now, they were building something new together, something worth holding on to. As the seasons continued to shift, Daniel found himself embracing life in a way he hadn't in years. The struggles of his past, the lingering shadows of war, and the isolation he had once felt seemed more distant now. Each day brought new challenges, but with Max by his side, Daniel felt like he could face anything. It was the little moments, the simple pleasures, that kept him going. Waking up to the sound of Max's paws tapping on the floor, the quiet companionship they shared during their morning walks, and the comfort of knowing that they had both made it through the worst. Daniel spent his days rebuilding his life, piece by piece, and Max was right there with him. Whether they were working on small projects around the house, taking long walks through the park, or simply sitting together on the porch, Daniel knew that he was no longer alone. Max had been his rock, his constant companion, and the bond they shared was stronger than ever. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He thought back to the days when everything had seemed uncertain, when he wasn't sure if he would ever find peace again. But now, with Max beside him, it felt like the pieces were finally falling into place. The world had moved on, but Daniel had found a way to move forward too, in his own way. Max's presence brought a sense of stability and comfort that Daniel couldn't put into words. As the years passed, the neighborhood around them continued to change. New families moved in, and the park became busier, filled with the sounds of children playing and the laughter of friends. Daniel watched it all with a sense of calm. It was as if he had finally found his place in the world again, and he didn't need to rush. He took things one day at a time, enjoying the small moments of joy that life offered. Max, ever loyal, was always by his side, offering a sense of calm that Daniel could never have found without him. One evening, as they walked through the park, Daniel noticed a couple sitting on a bench, watching the sunset. They waved at him, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel found himself walking over to join them. It was a small act, but it felt like a step forward. He had spent so long closing himself off, avoiding interactions with others, but now, surrounded by the warmth of good company, he realized that there was nothing to fear. Life had so much more to offer, and, with Max by his side, he was ready to embrace it. They sat together, sharing stories and laughter as the sky turned dark and the stars began to emerge. Daniel listened to the conversation, participating when he felt comfortable, but for the most part, he simply enjoyed being in the moment. The world around him felt alive in a way it hadn't before. And as he looked down at Max, who was lying at his feet, his eyes closed in contentment, Daniel knew that no matter where life took them, they would always be together. It wasn't about the big moments. It was about the quiet ones, the ones that made everything worthwhile. Together, they had built a life filled with simple joys, and for Daniel, that was enough. He didn't need anything more. He had Max, and that was all he would ever need. The weeks turned into months, and the world continued to move around Daniel and Max. They had found a rhythm in their quiet life, one that was simple, yet deeply fulfilling. Every morning, they would rise early, just as the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains. Daniel would make his coffee, the warmth of the mug a small comfort in the cool morning air. Max would sit by his feet, watching him with those loyal amber eyes, waiting for the day to begin. They would head out for their walk soon after, the streets still quiet, the world still waking up. As the seasons changed, so did the landscape of their life. Daniel had started volunteering at the local community center, helping out with projects, offering his hand when he could. He never thought he would be someone to volunteer, but there was something about it that felt right. Max would come with him, sitting quietly in the corner while Daniel worked. He wasn't just a dog. He was part of the community now, a symbol of loyalty and friendship, a reminder of what could be rebuilt. Daniel found himself growing more comfortable in his new routine. He wasn't the same man who had come home from the war. He wasn't the same man who had wandered the streets, unsure of his place. No, now he was someone who had found peace, someone who had learned to let go of the weight of the past. One day, while walking through the park, Daniel ran into Sarah, the neighbor he had met at the barbecue months ago. She waved him over, and with a smile, invited him to join a small gathering they were having that weekend. For the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't hesitate. He agreed to come. The gathering was small, just a few families from the neighborhood, but it was enough. Daniel found himself talking to people, laughing at jokes, sharing stories, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he belonged. He wasn't just the quiet man who kept to himself. He was part of something, part of a community that cared. Max, as always, was by his side, roaming the yard with the other dogs, his tail wagging as he made new friends of his own. Daniel looked down at his loyal companion and smiled. He realized how much he had missed moments like these, the simple, everyday connections that made life richer. After the gathering, as the sun began to set and the sky turned to shades of orange and pink, Daniel and Max walked home, side by side. Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. He had come so far from where he had been, and now, with Max by his side, he felt like he had everything he needed. They walked in silence, the sounds of the evening settling around them. Max's steady footsteps echoed alongside Daniel's, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt at peace with himself. There were still days when the past would rear its head, when the memories would come rushing back, but they no longer controlled him. With Max, he had learned that healing wasn't just about moving forward. It was about finding peace in the present, accepting the past, and building something new, something worth fighting for. As they reached their front door, Daniel paused, taking one last look at the sky above, the stars beginning to twinkle. He wasn't sure what the future held, but with Max at his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had made it through the hardest of times, and now, they were building a new chapter in their lives, one step at a time. As the days grew longer and the warmth of summer settled into the air, Daniel and Max continued their journey of healing, each day bringing new growth, new possibilities. Daniel had learned to embrace the quiet moments and the small joys that life offered. The sound of Max's paws patting beside him became a constant reminder that he was never truly alone. They spent their days in the park, in the yard, and in the small routines that had become the backbone of their life together. Sometimes, Daniel would sit on the porch and watch Max run, his energy infectious, his spirit untamed. The dog's joy was so pure, so unfiltered, that it often reminded Daniel of the freedom they both had, freedom from the chains of the past, from the weight of their struggles. Every now and then, the shadow of the past would creep into Daniel's mind, a fleeting reminder of the battles he had fought, both in the field and within himself. But it no longer consumed him, alive with the sounds of the evening, children's laughter fading into the distance, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the steady rhythm of their footsteps on the pavement. They returned to their quiet home, where the simple comforts of life awaited them. Daniel opened the door, and Max bounded in ahead of him, ready to settle in for the night. Daniel followed, closing the door behind him. The weight of the world temporarily lifted from his shoulders. He sat down in his favorite chair, and Max curled up at his feet, as he always did. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. The past would always be a part of him, but it no longer defined him. With Max by his side, he had found a new purpose, a new path forward. Together, they had weathered the storm, and now, they were ready for whatever came next. As the years passed, Daniel and Max found themselves becoming even more in tune with one another, as if they had truly become a part of the world around them. Daniel's life had transformed in ways he never thought possible, and it was all thanks to the steadfast presence of Max. They had weathered storms together, not just the physical ones that life threw at them, but the emotional ones that Daniel had fought silently. Now, Max was more than just a companion. He was a symbol of hope, a reminder that no matter how difficult life became, there was always a way forward. One day, as they sat in the backyard, Daniel watched Max run across the lawn, his movements as graceful as ever, the sunlight catching in his fur. The dog's energy was infectious, and for a brief moment, Daniel was reminded of how far they had both come. It had been years since Daniel returned home, and yet, sometimes it felt like it had only been yesterday. Max had helped him heal, in ways words never could. The memories of war, of loneliness, and of the battles he had fought, both on the front lines and within himself, seemed to drift away when he was with Max. Their bond had grown deeper than ever, a connection that didn't need words to be understood. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, Daniel leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He could hear the rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the chirping of birds in the distance, and the soft thud of Max's paws on the grass as he came to sit beside him. The dog rested his head on Daniel's knee, looking up at him with those ever-watchful amber eyes, full of understanding. Daniel ran his fingers through Max's fur, a gentle smile crossing his face. "We've come a long way, haven't we, boy?" he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. Max responded with a soft woof, nuzzling his face into Daniel's hand, a quiet reassurance that, yes, they had made it through everything together. The world had changed around them, but they had remained constant. As the evening settled in and the stars began to appear in the sky, Daniel found himself at peace, something he hadn't known in a long time. He wasn't the man who had left for war, unsure of who he was or what his future held. He wasn't the man who had struggled to find his place back home. No, he was someone new now, someone who had learned to embrace the life he had, to appreciate the quiet moments, and to find joy in the little things. Max had given him that. The dog had taught him what it meant to truly live again, to take each day as it came and to savor the moments that mattered most. With Max beside him, Daniel knew that he was never truly alone. And as they sat in the calm of the evening, the world around them quiet and still, Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came, he and Max would face it together, side by side, just as they always had. Time passed, and the bond between Daniel and Max only grew stronger with each passing day. Life, though never perfect, had found a rhythm, a comfortable beat that Daniel could follow. He had accepted that peace, real peace, didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it came quietly, in the form of a morning walk with Max or an evening spent on the porch watching the sunset. They had settled into a routine, one that felt like home, and Daniel could sense that he had finally found his place. Max had been with him through it all, through the darkness, the loneliness, and the pain. Now, Max was more than just a dog. He was a reminder of resilience, of love, of loyalty that went beyond words. One afternoon, as Daniel and Max walked down the familiar path near their house, Daniel couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. It wasn't just the town around him, which had shifted in its own way, with new stores opening and families moving in. It was the quiet transformation within him. He wasn't the man who had come home broken and unsure. He was someone who had learned to find joy in the present, to appreciate the simple moments that came his way. Max, trotting happily beside him, seemed to know that things were different now. The dog's steady pace, his head held high, were a mirror of Daniel's own quiet confidence. They had faced their struggles together, and now they were ready to face whatever came next. As they reached the park, Daniel spotted a group of children playing near the swings. Max perked up at the sound of their laughter, and without hesitation, bounded over to join them. The kids cheered and laughed as Max ran circles around them, his tail wagging furiously. Daniel smiled, watching his dog interact with the children. It was a small moment, but it was one that meant everything. Max had always been able to bring joy to people, to make them smile in a way that no one else could. Daniel thought about how far they had come, how much they had endured. The years of struggle, the loneliness, the uncertainty, all of it had led them to this point. And now, they were stronger, together. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Daniel called Max over. The dog came bounding back to his side, tongue hanging out in exhaustion, but his eyes still bright with happiness. Daniel bent down to scratch behind Max's ears, a soft chuckle escaping him. "You're a good boy, Max," he said quietly. Max gave a contented woof, as if in agreement. They began to walk back home, the peaceful quiet of the evening wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Daniel felt a sense of calm that he hadn't known in years. The world had a way of keeping him on his toes, of throwing challenges his way, but in this moment, he knew that with Max by his side, he could handle anything. They returned to the quiet of their home, where the simplicity of their life was enough. Daniel sat in his favorite chair, Max curling up at his feet, and for the first time in a long while, he felt truly content. The past was a part of him, yes, but it no longer defined him. With Max beside him, Daniel knew that the future was full of possibilities. Together, they had built a life that was rich in love, in loyalty, and in the quiet peace they had fought so hard to find. The years seemed to pass by more quickly now, the world continuing to turn, but Daniel and Max remained in their steady, quiet rhythm. The seasons shifted, bringing new beginnings, but their connection remained constant. Daniel had come to realize that the life he had once feared was now one he had embraced fully, thanks to the unshakable bond he shared with Max. Each day brought new joys, no matter how small, and every moment was a gift. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they walked through the park, Daniel marveled at the simplicity of it all. The leaves, now vibrant in shades of red and gold, rustled gently under their feet. Max, with his usual enthusiasm, darted ahead, chasing after fallen leaves as if they were the greatest treasure in the world. Daniel chuckled, watching him. He had come to understand that there was beauty in the small moments, the quiet walks, the shared glances, the contentment that came from simply being together. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but over the years, he had stopped looking over his shoulder, stopped worrying about the weight of the past. Max had helped him see that the present was what mattered, that the love between them was enough to keep moving forward. As they continued walking, they passed by the familiar faces of the neighbors they had come to know. They waved and smiled, and Daniel found himself smiling back, a warmth in his chest. He had never imagined this kind of life before, one filled with connections, with a sense of belonging. But here he was, surrounded by people who cared, a life he had built from the ground up. Max had been with him through it all, and he had never let go, always standing by his side, no matter what. Later that evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Daniel sat on the porch, Max curled up at his feet. The world around them had quieted, the bustle of the day fading away into the soft hum of the night. Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling the cool night air brush against his skin. He glanced down at Max, whose eyes were half closed in contentment. The dog had grown older, but there was still a spark in his eyes, still the same loyal heart that had been there from the start. They had both changed over the years, but the love between them had remained timeless. Daniel let out a deep breath, his mind at ease. There was no more uncertainty, no more lingering doubts. He had found peace in his life, and he had found it with Max. The past was a part of him, but it no longer defined him. What mattered now was the present, the moments they shared together, the quiet joy of being alive. Daniel reached down and patted Max's head gently. "We've made it, buddy," he said quietly. Max opened one eye, looking up at him as if to say, "Yes, we have." And in that moment, Daniel knew that no matter what the future held, he was ready. He wasn't alone anymore. With Max by his side, he had everything he needed to face whatever came next. Together, they had built a life full of love, loyalty, and the kind of peace that comes only when two hearts beat as one.